They called it order. She knew it was control, and Sarah Winchester had no intention of surrendering to either. The wind cut sharp through the streets of Miller's Creek as Sarah Winchester clutched her mother's shawl tighter, each step echoing on the wooden sidewalk like a countdown she couldn't stop. Behind her, the town whispered, soft, sharp, and judgmental. Elder Thompson's voice rang out firm and final. "You'll marry James Blackwood come Sunday," just like that. No request. No room for refusal. Sarah stood rooted in place, every instinct screaming that something darker was unfolding beneath the surface. Her mother had warned her before the so-called accident that took her life. She'd spoken of a deed evidence the council feared something tied to the land to bloodlines they wanted erased. Now, with no family left and no legal document in hand, Sarah was seen as vulnerable, unmarried, unclaimed, an inconvenience to be corrected. The house her father built, the garden her mother filled with sacred herbs and stories, it was all at risk. The council spoke of stability, but Sarah knew the truth. This was about power, and her refusal to marry was a threat to it. Inside her coat, she clutched her mother's ring, its intricate tribal pattern misunderstood by the town, but full of meaning to Sarah. It wasn't just a keepsake, it was a key, and something inside her knew that the answers, the deed, the truth, the reason they feared her, were waiting by Crow's Lake. That was where her mother had walked often. That was where Sarah would go no matter the cost. Because this wasn't just about marriage. It was about memory. It was about her mother. And it was about fighting to keep both from being erased. They thought the ice would silence her, like it did her mother. But justice was riding in with a rifle and name, and no patience for cowards. The moon hung low over Crow's Lake, casting a cold sheen across its fractured surface as Sarah Winchester ran through the trees, her breath ragged in the winter air. Behind her, the town council's riders closed in boots, pounding torches flickering like devil's fire. She didn't cry out, not anymore. She had screamed when they came for her, screamed when they pulled her from her home. But now there was only the sound of wind and the silent prayer in her heart. She reached the edge of the frozen lake, the same place her mother had once stood searching for proof they said never existed. Sarah knew better now. Her mother hadn't fallen through the ice. She had been pushed just as they were about to do to her. James Blackwood grabbed her by the arm, the silver cross at his lapel, glinting like a mockery in the moonlight. "Truth dies tonight," he hissed. They dragged her toward the deep-end feet, slipping ice groaning beneath their weight. Then came the voice. "That's far enough. Deep, calm, dangerous." Sarah turned, and there, standing just beyond the lake's edge, was a man atop a broad-chested bay horse, rifle leveled, eyes cold as the Montana wind. Luke McCall, owner of the Double M, a cattleman with a reputation and the kind of quiet power no council could buy off. "She's under my protection now," he said. And when James laughed and reached for his pistol, Luke didn't hesitate. Gunfire cracked. Chaos erupted. And as the ice gave way beneath her plunging, Sarah into the freezing dark, it was Luke's hand that pulled her back to the surface, gasping, shivering, alive. They hadn't just failed to silence her, they had given her a witness, a protector, and now, maybe, a chance to fight back. Sometimes it takes nearly dying to find someone who finally listens, really listens. And when they do, the truth can finally breathe. The fire crackled in the stone hearth at the Double M Ranch, casting golden light across the study walls. Sarah Winchester sat curled in a wool blanket, a mug of hot coffee cradled in her hands, still thawing from the near-death plunge into Crow's Lake. Across from her, Luke McCall leaned against the desk, quiet, letting her gather her thoughts. He hadn't asked questions on the ride back. He hadn't pressured her for answers. He just brought her home his home and made sure she was safe. Now, for the first time in years, Sarah spoke the whole truth out loud. About the town council, about Elder Thompson, about the marriage she refused, and the property they tried to take. About her mother Catherine, who was called dangerous simply for being smart native and unwilling to be silenced. Sarah told him about the deed, the lost journal, the map hidden in beadwork. about how her mother had died at the same lake and how they'd just tried to do the same to her. Luke didn't interrupt once. When she finished, the room felt still like the land was holding its breath. "I believe you," he said, setting down his coffee. "And I've known that town was rotten for a long time. What they did to your mother, and what they tried tonight, ends now." Sarah looked up, truly seeing him. Not just a wealthy rancher, but a man of principle. A man whose silence carried more power than 1,000 speeches. "I want to finish what my mother started," she said. Luke nodded. "Then you won't do it alone." And in that quiet Montana night, something shifted. Sarah wasn't just running anymore. She was standing, and Luke McCall Rifle Ranch and all was standing with her. When you've carried the weight alone for too long, kindness doesn't just heal it. Reminds you that you were never meant to fight alone. The rooms at the Double M Ranch smelled of cedarwood and bread rising in the kitchen. Warm lamplight spilled down the hallway as Sarah stood at the window wrapped in one of Maria's quilts. Outside, fresh snow blanketed the paddocks, the fences casting long shadows under the full Montana moon. For the first time in years, she felt safe enough to breathe. Maria Rodriguez, sharp-eyed, soft-spoken, had taken her in like a lost daughter. She never asked for explanations. She just brewed tea from herbs Sarah recognized from her mother's garden, brought clean clothes that somehow fit perfectly, and whispered, "Your mother would be proud," as she tucked her in that first night. Luke McCall hadn't said much, but his actions spoke louder than words ever could. He rode out at dawn, sent his men to keep watch over the church in Miller's Creek, and checked in each evening with a quiet, "How are you holding up? No pressure. No pity. Just presence. Steady and sure." One night by the fire, Sarah opened her mother's medicine pouch. The beadwork, so familiar, so sacred, gleamed in the firelight. It wasn't just decoration. It was a map, a message, a legacy, one she was finally ready to follow. She looked up to find Luke watching her, not with curiosity, but with recognition. He understood what it meant to carry something bigger than yourself, something holy, something worth fighting for. "I thought I lost everything," Sarah whispered. "You didn't," Luke replied. "You just hadn't found where it lived again." At that moment, Sarah didn't feel like a runaway. She felt like a woman reclaiming her name, her blood, and her fire. And as the wind howled gently beyond the ranch walls, she knew her mother wasn't gone. She was still guiding her, and Sarah Winchester was ready to rise. Some wounds don't need fixing. They just need someone to see them and stay. It was the quiet hours that brought them closest after the fire was banked low, and the ranch had fallen into a hush. Sarah sat curled in the armchair near the hearth, leafing through her mother's journal for the 100th time. Luke sat across from her, a cup of coffee cooling in his hands, not saying much. He didn't need to. His silence was steady like the rhythm of hooves across open country, comforting in its predictability. That night, something shifted. Sarah spoke first, tracing the edge of a photograph tucked inside the journal. "My mother always said this land held memory, that the wind carried voices if you listened hard enough." Luke nodded, then reached into the drawer beside him and pulled out a photo of his own, a young woman smiling with his same steel-gray eyes. "My sister," he said. "Jenny. Married into Miller's Creek. Started asking questions about land grants and missing families. They called it an accident. Same winter your mother died." Sarah's breath caught. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was sacred. Grief met grief. Two stories, one truth. "She believed in justice," Luke continued, "and I've been waiting for someone just like her. Someone brave enough to pick up what they tried to bury." Sarah looked into his eyes, quiet, unwavering, familiar. Not a cowboy come to rescue her. A partner, a witness, someone who saw her not as a burden, but as a fire still burning. "I can't promise I'll win," she whispered. "I don't need you to win," Luke said. "I just need you to keep riding." And in that moment, the air felt warmer. Not because of the fire, but because two people who had every reason to give up were choosing to stand up together. Not out of romance, out of respect. And maybe, just maybe, the start of something more. He didn't come to rescue her. He came to offer her something rarer respect and a seat at the table. The snow was still falling outside when Luke laid the envelope on the table. No fanfare, no speech, just a quiet gesture that would change everything. Sarah eyed it with the wariness of someone who'd been offered help, too many times each one tied to strings or silence. But Luke McCall was different. His offer didn't come with expectations. It came with terms, a contract, a choice. "I've paid off your mortgage," he said plainly. "Not as charity, but because I believe in investing in people who do the right thing, even when it costs them everything." Sarah's hand tightened around the coffee cup. Her pride flared. But before she could speak, Luke pulled out another document, this one sturdier hand-signed stamped. "I want to start a breeding operation. On your land. Joint management. You keep your home. You earn a wage. You get a share of profits. And we build something together, something lasting." He slid a brass key across the table. "There's a strong box in my saddlebag with seed money. Enough to fix the barn, buy fencing, replace stock. The general store, the lumberyard, they'll honour your credit under my name." Sarah stared at the paperwork. This wasn't a handout. This was a lifeline woven with dignity. "You see me as capable," she said quietly. Luke nodded. "I see you as someone who stood in the cold and said no to the easy road. That's the kind of partner I want." She thought of her mother of beadwork maps and buried truth. And she knew deep down this was her moment to rise. With a breath that felt like freedom, she picked up the pen. "Let's build it." And for the first time since the lake, her voice didn't shake. It rang.